Most pilots never learn how to actually feel an airplane. They may learn plenty of checklists and procedures and numbers, but they don't learn the feel. And that feel needs to start early. It needs to start in the very first lessons. I'm David Twibell, a flight instructor and corporate pilot. And in this video, I'm going to show you what you should be seeing, hearing, and feeling both on the ground and in flight. Whether you're just getting started or you've been flying for a while, we need to go from just telling the airplane what to do to listening to it first. So come along, let's get this 1946 Luscombe started and we'll get on our way.
Alright, good morning everyone. Welcome on board the Luscombe. We've gotten her started and we're ready to start talking about what we should be seeing, hearing, and feeling while we're taxiing. We're over here on the ramp and we're going to do a little bit of taxiing around on the ramp before we taxi out for departure. So let's get started with that. The first thing we should be doing when we're taxiing, of course, as we all should know, is to taxi slowly. And I always like to think about how slow do I want to taxi if I have a brake failure. That could be a dual brake failure or it could be a single-sided brake failure. But that's going to be one of the reasons I want to taxi slow. There's a lot of reasons, but that's going to be one of them. Or a nose wheel or a tail wheel steering failure. Now the next thing is you got to recognize with airplanes that they do not turn like cars. Modern cars have very good steering that basically feels the same more or less across most average cars. It's good positive steering and it works great. Airplanes, not the case. And so what you need to do is first you need to listen to your airplane about how it taxis. And so I've got the airplane rolling slowly here, and this is a tail dragger and a Luscombe, and so they turn pretty quick. But you know, a Cessna 172, even depending on which tail number of 172 you're flying, may turn well or it might not turn well. So what you want to do is get it out on the open ramp and then just put in rudder and see what happens. Now we'll see what happens with a tailwheel airplane is we get what we call a ground loop. And this is a progressively tightening turn, tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And I'm just holding the rudder here. And you can see the airplane's just pivoting, almost pivoting at this point. I can help it out a little bit. And eventually a ground loop will just end up in you pivoting around on one wheel like this. Okay. Now a nose wheel will not do that. A nose wheel airplane, if you put in rudder, that will eventually get it into a turn. Some airplanes have good nose wheel steering and they start turning immediately. Other ones you put it in, you wait a little more, and then it slowly, gently starts turning. And you need to know that. And most people mask that with brakes. They just use the brakes to turn the airplane if the airplane's not turning as soon as they want. But we need to learn how to listen to the steering, and the only way to do that is to experiment with it. So in a tail dragger like this, to start a turn, I'm going to put rudder in, and once I got the turn going, I actually neutralize the rudders. The rudders are in the middle right now, and we're turning, right? A nose wheel airplane would not do that. If you put in rudder, it'll turn while you've put in rudder, but then it will stop turning once you take out the rudder. So there's a key difference, and even just from tail wheel to nose wheel, or just even within different nose wheel airplanes, you'll see different tendencies. And so you need to go out on a big ramp and experiment. How long and how far do I travel down the taxiway before the airplane starts turning when I put in rudder? And once you learn that, now you're more steering it like a ship than you are a car, right? You're leading your turns, and right, a ship doesn't turn on a dime, that's for sure, and airplanes don't either. So we need to be ready for that, and we need to do that by experimenting. Okay, so I felt out the turning behaviors of the Luscombe this morning, showed you that a little bit. So let's go ahead and start our taxi down to the runway here. And the winds are almost calm. They're blowing just 2 or 3 knots at the moment out of 160. So we're going to taxi to runway 20, and I'll make my call here. Wahoo traffic, Luscombe 77903 is on the ramp. Taxi runway 20, crossing runway 1331. Wahoo. And we're clear right, and we're clear left. And we're crossing our grass runway here at Wahoo. And off we go. Once we get across, we'll call clear. Wahoo traffic, Luscombe 903 is clear of 1331 Wahoo. Okay, so we're clear, and now we've got a couple things to think about. The first one is going to be the wind. And the wind is coming at us from behind to the right. And that would mean that we should dive away by pushing the stick all the way forward and to the left with a quartering tailwind. 2 or 3 knots wind, it's not going to make really any difference. But we can put the input in there just to remind ourselves of how to do that. And then we got to think about the wind in terms of pushing or pulling. So right now the wind is pushing us, even if it's very little. And so the more of a tailwind you have on taxi, which you probably will because you're going to take off into the wind, right? You can expect to have the RPM back even less with a tailwind pushing you. So that's the first thing you got to think about. Do I have a headwind or tailwind or crosswind? How do I set the controls for that? And then how do I adjust my power and brakes to make sure that I'm not getting too fast? The next thing you got to think about is slope. And it takes very little slope on a taxiway to really slow you down or speed you up. And so we have just the tiniest bit of uphill slope here that I'm working with, and I can just see that looking over the nose. Once you see some aggressive slope both ways, it'll be easier for you to sense which kind you have. But slope makes a big difference too. So if you have a lot of downhill slope, you're probably going to be all the way idle, and you might even be into the brakes as you taxi. And so so that's another thing we're thinking about. And then the next thing we're thinking about is centerline control. And to be honest, most people taxi off to the left. This is very common. They sit off to the left in their car, and then they sit to the they push the left side of the car to the left side of the lane so that the car itself is centered. But airplanes are different, right? Airplanes, yes, we are sitting off to the side, but in my Luscombe here, my head is only about 8 inches off of the center line of the airplane. So I barely have to offset at all, if any. And then you see the thing in reverse. When you put someone in the right seat, now they offset to the right. So our brain just kind of mirror images it. But what we want to do is basically put ourselves directly on the center line and looking straight over the nose. I like to take my hands and point them straight out from my chest, and that should be where the far end of the taxi stripe is in my field of view. And then the final thing you can do is whenever you're coming into park, you can pick a line, a concrete line or an actual painted line, and you can try to be down the center of it. And then once you get to where you're going, you stop, you shut down, you get out, and then you check, is my nose wheel or tail wheel on the center line or not? And that's a way to help you refine your center line control. So here we are in the run-up area. I'm holding the brakes now, and I'm going to do my checklist and flow. So I have a very short checklist here. This is a simple airplane. We'll run it once we do our flow. So my door is closed, my fuel valve is on, my mags are both, 0 on the airspeed, altimeter matches field elevation, ball is in the middle, oil pressure's in the green, oil temperature's coming up, RPM's good, vertical speed 0, my door on the right side is closed, my trim is set. And now I'm going to wipe out the controls. So I'm going to push the stick to the right elevator goes, right aileron goes up, pull the stick back, push the stick to the left aileron or the right aileron goes down now. I look to the left aileron is up, stick forward, stick all the way to the right, the left aileron goes down. I can just look back and see that the elevator is working. And now we're ready for the checklist. So fuel valve is on, fuel gauge is showing correctly, control freedom checked, trim tab checked, altimeter set, and now for the run-up. So we pull the stick back, push it up to 1500 RPM, and the biggest thing I see here is people creeping in the brakes. So you want to actually look outside and make sure, no, the airplane is not moving. You want to keep your eye on that as you go. Now we check our mags, so we go left, a little bit of a drop, right, a little bit of a drop, check our carburetor heat. A little bit of drop. Back in because I'm paranoid. Back out again. Yes, in fact, I do see a little drop. Not actually paranoid, but sometimes you just don't know if you saw what you saw. So you check it again. And then back to idle. I like to check that with the carb heat. And because it's still a fair bit cool this morning, if I leave it at idle too long, it's going to start struggling. Okay, engine idle checked. Both doors unlocked and closed, but latched. Seatbelt is secure. Takeoff. We'll go through the takeoff briefing. This is going to be a normal takeoff on runway 20. We have a left crosswind, so we'll start with the stick to the left. Any issues, abnormalities, before we rotate at 55, we're going to close the throttle and abort. Any issues at low altitude, we're landing straight ahead on remaining runway. If we don't have remaining runway, then I'm going to make a very gentle left-hand turn and land out to the field just off the left-hand side of the airport. And if we have a partial power loss, we'll determine if we can make it back to the field or not. And depending on how that's going, in terms of maintaining altitude, we'll either come back or find a place to land out. So that's the brief. We're going to take off, proceed out to the west, and then walk you through some more of what you need to see, hear, and feel. So now, I have not heard anyone this morning. I have my radio volume up. I'm going to check my ADS-B, see how we're doing out there, and good and bad. Looks like we've got someone just passing by the field, but they're up at 7,500 feet headed northbound, so we shouldn't have to worry about them. Otherwise, we're clear. Now we'll do a visual traffic check. So I'm going to do a pivot turn. My tail is clear. Don't see anybody. Okay. And now one other little thing we can do, something we can see, is we can come off the spot that we did our run up and make a little turn, look back over our shoulder, and make sure we don't have a puddle of either fuel or oil, which we do not. Another little check you can do. Alrighty, make our departure call. Wahoo traffic, Luscombe 77903 departing runway 20 via west departure, Wahoo. Okay, clear. Now, this being an antique airplane, I don't have any lights to turn on, I don't have a transponder to turn on, I don't even have a mixture control. So, mags are both, carb heat's cold, and stick to the left, wind out of the left. Full power, oil pressure's in the green, oil temperature's up good, airspeed's alive, tail's coming up. 55, rotating. Set my trim, hold the throttle. So I always hold the throttle on takeoff.
Classic traffic 9 Alpha Romeo. We're going to be going departing out to the northeast plasma.
I always hold the throttle on takeoff in case we had throttle creep. You know, there's no reason to give yourself an engine failure just because the throttle came out on you. So I like to hold the throttle in and hold the carb heat in with my thumb. Okay, we get up and away. Clear to the right. Turning to the right. We're at 300 feet below pattern altitude, which is the altitude to turn at Untowered Airport. Pointed to the west. Okay, and on our first video, where we talked about some of the basic fundamentals of being a captain, we talked a little bit, just a little bit, about what we should be seeing. So we're going to talk more about that today in this video. I'm going to see if I got anything on a climb checklist, and nope, we're good there. Put that away. Okay, so the first thing, like we said in our last video, that we're sensing is our attitude. So right now I have the nose, sitting just about 1.5 inches below the horizon, and if I let go of the controls, the nose should stay perfectly in position. And I'm messing with it just a little bit to get it to stay there. But the first thing we're looking for visually is our pitch attitude, which is our up and down over the nose. So we're going to start by talking about what we see over the nose, and then we're going to talk about what we see out of some other views, which you might find really interesting. And so we're up and away. We're going to climb to 3,000 feet. And I'm just bringing the pitch up and down here, so I can bring the pitch way up if I want. So there's the pitch up pretty high. Just showing you different pitch attitudes so you get an idea of what you might see here. Here's nose down pretty low. But we'll come back up to here. And we'll level off at 3,000 feet. Okay, and we need to be able to sense pitch attitude changes to a very fine degree. Way less than actually a degree, 1 degree of variation over the nose. You've got to be able to hold way less than that. And I'm just talking about the angle of the airplane there. We need to be able to sense very small change in that attitude. So we're coming out here. We're going to bring the power back just a little bit. We're doing 95 miles an hour. And so now, one of the things that I'd recommend that you do is have your flight instructor take the controls and show you the smallest, tiniest change in pitch attitude that they can make. So I'm going to make a very tiny change right there. I saw a tiny little change. I'm going to put it back. And you should be able to see just the absolute sliver change of difference in the gap of the pitch of the airplane. Basically, when it comes to pitch and power and altitude and airspeed, those are all vertical things, right? That all begins with seeing pitch attitude and being able to see it to a very fine degree. So we're going along right now, and you'll notice that the terrain is going underneath me, but the gap still remains the same. So don't let the terrain moving underneath you mess with you at all. You just need to be able to see that gap over the nose, okay? And you'll know if you can hold a good pitch attitude or not if the airplane continues to do what it was doing. And so right now that's about 92 miles an hour, and maybe just the absolute tiniest little bit of a climb. Most importantly, that airspeed does not change and that gap does not change. And this is something we rush over way too often, but we need as pilots to be able to set and forget that pitch attitude to where it just absolutely stays rock solid. Of course, on a calm wind day, but it should just be able to absolutely hang there. So what I like to do with my students is have them set the gap, and we'll get into trim here in a little bit. Set the gap and trim it, and then we should be able to let go for 30 seconds. And it should absolutely not move. Even that tiniest little bit that your flight instructor should be able to show you that the nose moves as being the first thing you should be able to pick up, it shouldn't even move that much in 30 seconds. And why is that important? It's important because if you cannot set and forget pitch to a very fine degree, you're not going to have the mental bandwidth to scan, you're not going to have the mental bandwidth to be on the radio, or to have situational awareness. And so this is like just something we have to fine-tune to to a very detailed degree. Okay, so we've got our pitch nailed down, let's say, and then in terms of what we're seeing, and now let's see what we should be feeling in terms of pitch, specifically in the stick. And so what I like to do in this case is I like to mess up the trim on my students. So I'm going to take the controls and keep the airplane pointed where it needs to be. And I've just messed up the trim. And if I let go of the stick, the airplane drops, right? And it speeds up. And that's not what we want. So to keep the airplane going 92 miles an hour in level flight, I'm going to have to sit here and hold control pressure. And this I like to call is an IQ drain right here. If you have to hold pressure, you're constantly having to figure out how much pressure to hold, and that's IQ points that you could be spending figuring out how to do a myriad of other things. So what I'm going to do is trim off that pressure. I'm feeling the pressure in my hand, and I'm slowly spinning the trim wheel until the attitude just remains perfectly the same, and I can let go, and we go right back to the exact same pitch picture there at 92 miles an hour in level flight. And look, Ma, no hands, right? So there we go. Now I can do it the other way, run in the trim, and the nose goes up, so that's not good. So now I have to push forward, and again, another IQ drain here because I'm having to push on the stick. And so now I bring the pitch picture back, and if I leave it long enough, the airspeed and the altimeter will settle back down to what they were doing before. 92 miles an hour, and altimeter not moving. But now I'm holding control pressure, and I need to get rid of that. So now I run the trim the other way until that pressure leaves. And I should just be able to slowly ease back on my pressure on the stick. And it's gone, right? So the only time I spin the trim wheel is if I feel in the stick that I need to push or pull. That's the only time I move the trim. I don't move it because the nose is in the wrong place or because the airspeed's in the wrong place. I move it because I feel pressure in my hand. That's the only reason. Now, to not get too far from home here, I'm going to turn to the south. So I'm going to lift my wing, clear left, looking left, clear left, turning left. Okay, so now these trim exercises that I just showed you, you can do these over and over and over again, and you should do them over and over and over again in rapid succession. So I'm going to do another set. I'm going to mess up the trim. The airplane comes way out of trim. I'm going to push the airplane back over, reestablish my pitch picture. The airplane speeds up. I'm holding control pressure, and now I start to run the trim because I sense I need pressure. And you can do 10 of these really quickly. You could probably do 10 of these in 5 minutes, and they are absolutely worth it. You should absolutely do this. I do it to myself, just like I'm doing now, to warm my senses back up to what I should be doing. Okay, so we got the airplane back, 92 miles an hour level flight. Now I mess the trim up the other way. The airplane goes into a dive. I pull back on the stick. I'm pulling back pressure, and I can start trimming immediately because I feel pressure in my hand. Get the airplane back. I overshot the trim just a little bit. And I got just a tiniest bit of a climb. The gap over the nose is a little too small, so I lower the nose. And there we go. So there's another set. And we just, when you're starting out or if you're refreshing, you need to go out and do a lot of sets of those because, like I said, if you can't get trim perfect, you're just going to be fighting yourself the entire time. Okay, so we've got pitch, picture, and trim figured out a little bit now. So now let's talk a little bit more about what we should be seeing in terms of pitch in other directions. So for that, I'm going to get my other camera up and running here, and what I'm going to do is video out the side window, and I'll overlay these videos for you so you can see what I'm getting at here. Get my camera set up just right. Okay. Okay, so we're flying level. We can see that over the nose, but we can also see it off the wing. So if I raise the nose, we see that the angle between the horizon and the wingtip itself increases. Go back to level flight. The wingtip and the bottom of the wing and the horizon are now parallel again. If we lower the nose, we see the angle now decrease between the wing and the horizon. And that's what we're looking for. Okay. Now I don't want to work too far south, but I'm going to do a right turn, and I'm going to show you my right turning clearing. So I lift the wing, clear, looking right, clear right, turning right. So because I'm flying a high wing, I always pick up the wing before I turn. That way I can see if there's any traffic out there, because as we discussed in the last video, traffic should be sitting above the horizon. And now we're turning. And now you can see that when we're turning, that the terrain also sweeps relative to the wingtip. So in this case, the wingtip is sweeping backwards across the terrain with the right wing and a right turn. And we're going to see that when we roll out of this turn to the north, hopefully the sun's not in our eyes here when we do this. Still morning time. No, it's good. We roll out and we see that the wing comes back there. So now, we can also look to our wingtip to tell if we're in a turn or not. And we do that, we can look at the gaps between the left wing and the right wing. And I'm looking to the left and I see the gap. I look to the right and the gap is the same. Now, even if I just drop the wing, I drop the wing just a tiny bit there. Maybe I can even touch the horizon. There we go. We see that the airplane is turning, right? So what I want to do is be able to focus on just keeping those gaps between the wingtips even. Right about there. And now let's say I pick the wing up just a little too much, right? Now the wingtip is up. Now we see that the wingtip is sweeping forward over the terrain, and that tells us that we are turning to the left. So I drop the wingtip back down, and now the terrain still goes by, but it goes by slower. So these are the visual cues that you can use while looking out on your wings, so that you can successfully turn the airplane or keep the airplane level in both pitch and bank while you're scanning, right? Because 90% of the time should be spent looking outside. So if we can look off the wing and see our pitch and our bank, then we don't need to look at our instruments, we don't need to look over the nose, and then we can be confident and comfortable looking in any direction and flying and scanning at the same time. So let's see here. Now let's look at what yaw does. And we know that if we push on the right pedal, the nose sweeps to the right, and if we push the stick or the rudder to the left, the nose sweeps to the left. And so one exercise you should do is feel out the rudders, right? Have your instructor keep the airplane level with the ailerons, but you work the nose side to side with the rudders, just like this, like I'm doing. Gently, of course, at first, and side to side. And then if we look out the wingtip, we'll see that when we apply right rudder, the wingtip sweeps back. When we apply left rudder, the wingtip sweeps forward. And so we can even sense if we're using the rudder or not just by looking off the wing. So we do that. Now, the next thing we're going to do in terms of feel is we need to feel what the rudder does. We've seen what it does, right? It yaws the airplane to the right, it yaws the airplane to the left, more or less, especially if we keep the wings level. And I'm going to turn off my other camera here. We need to feel what it does. So what I like to do is have my student give me the controls, close their eyes, take their feet off the pedals, and then what I'm going to do is apply the rudder and hold it. So in this case, I applied left rudder, and we see that the ball goes out the right, like this. And we see that if we keep the wings level with the ailerons, the airplane slowly turns. And so then I ask the student, what are you feeling? And they'll kind of feel discombobulated at first, and they'll say, I don't know, maybe I feel like I'm leaning to the right. And I'll say, yeah, that's exactly right. And then I have them open their eyes and see that the ball is out to the right. And then I'll put the ball back in the middle, still keeping the wings level. And then I'll have them close their eyes, and I'll push the ball out to the left with the right rudder. And if I keep the airplane level with opposite aileron, the airplane now turns to the right in a level turn. So we call this a flat turn. Very uncomfortable, but it is possible. But so then the student is feeling like they're leaning to the left. And we call this seat of the pants flying. And this is because you're literally feeling down in the seat of your pants what the airplane is trying to do. You're feeling pressed to one side or not. And so what I'll do is I'll start off, their eyes are closed, and I'll give them big inputs, and I'll really kick the ball out. And they'll say, okay, I'm feeling like I'm leaning to the right. And then I'll kick it way out to the left, and they'll feel like they're leaning way to the left. And then what I'll do is I'll put the ball in the middle, and then I'll just slowly ease the ball out until they feel it. And usually at about a half a ball width, they'll be able to sense with their eyes closed that the ball is out. And once they can do that, now they have that seat of the pants coordination feel, and now without even looking at the ball, we can keep the ball in the middle because we know what it feels like. So I'm going to guess that the ball is centered there, perfectly centered, right? Now I'm going to bank the airplane, turn the airplane a little bit, kick the rudder around, really screw things up, and then I'm going to go back to wings level. I'm going to feel it in the seat of my pants. I'm going to keep scanning. I'm going to keep looking around. I'm going to feel it centered, and the ball's back in the middle. And I can tell you here in this Luscombe that the ball does not go in the middle unless you put it there. So that's the seat of my pants working to tell me that I have coordination. Now, let's look at what the rudder does by itself. So we're going to point the airplane to the north, and I'm only going to control pitch. I'm not going to control bank. And we need to see what happens when we put in rudder without any aileron whatsoever. So I put in some rudder, and in this particular airplane, we see that it actually banks the airplane and kicks the coordination out, right? So we can, depending on the type of airplane, initiate a turn with the rudder only. Is it comfortable? Absolutely not. Is it good technique? 99% of the time, no, absolutely not. But we need to know what the airplane does by just doing one input at a time. Just like we did in pitch, right? We saw the pitch over the nose, but we also need to see, hey, what happens when we apply just rudder in our airplane, right? The airplane banks and kicks out the coordination, and I let go of the rudder there for a second. It kind of swirled around on us. But that is what the rudder does. And now that brings us then to what does the aileron do by itself. And so I'm going to take my feet off the pedals, and in a Luscombe it doesn't take long for the airplane to get out of coordination, like we can see there. So I'm just going to kind of gently help it every now and then. But I'm going to shove the stick to the left, and I want you to notice which way the yaw or the nose yaws. So I'm going to get the airplane tracking north here. We're headed up here towards the Platte River, and I'm going to apply left aileron, and we see that the nose yaws to the right. I let go of the stick, the airplane's in a bank, and it starts turning in that direction. So that's not pleasant. Now the same thing happens in the other direction. I've got the ball in the middle, I take my feet off the rudders, I crank in right stick, and the airplane goes to the left in terms of yaw, and then eventually comes into a turn. And we call this adverse yaw. So this is another thing you need to go out and do with your instructor. You need to go out and feel adverse yaw. And so what I like to do is have the student take their feet off the rudders, and then we work the stick back and forth like this. And it feels awful. The ball is sliding all over the place. The nose is sliding all around. It's ugly, but this is adverse yaw. And in a Luscombe, like this airplane, has a lot of it. Your Cessna 172 or Piper Cherokee might not have as much, but it has it. And so you need need to find it, and you need to be aggressive with the ailerons to find it. So now this then brings up of what is the point of the rudder, and the point of the rudder in flight is to counteract that adverse yaw. So now if I apply left stick and left rudder together, and then right stick, right rudder together, the ball stays much closer to the middle if I'm doing my job, and the airplane doesn't yaw the opposite way that we want it to turn. And it just feels way better, feels way more comfortable, and you can go along doing this. This exercise goes by many names. Some people call it Dutch rolls, which is kind of technically incorrect term, but it works. I like to call them rolls on heading, because I'm trying to generally keep the airplane pointed in one direction. The nose is turning back and forth, but it's canceling itself out each turn, and I'm just going back and forth, stick to the left, rudder left, stick to the right, rudder to the right, and going back and forth, back and forth. And so that's another fundamental exercise that you need to go out and do in the very beginning, early lessons, lesson 2 or lesson 3, somewhere in there, and feel out that adverse yaw. So I'll take my feet off the rudders again. It just feels awful. I'm sliding around the same way the ball is sliding around. And then I put my feet on the pedals, and then I proportionally apply rudder whenever I'm applying stick. So if the stick is to the right, the rudder is to the right. If the stick is to the left, the rudder is to the left. Doesn't matter if I'm in a left bank or a right bank. If I'm using the stick, the rudder goes with it. And if I'm using just a little bit of stick, I use just a little bit of rudder. If I'm using a lot of stick, I use a lot of rudder. And so this is what I would call preemptive control. It's control that we're putting in ahead of time or with an input to keep a problem from becoming an issue. When I first learned how to fly, I was just told, step on the ball, which is reactionary. It's, oh, the ball is out, well, you need to push the rudder to get it back in. And so you're always behind in that case. But if you proactively know that the stick and rudder go together, then you can work them together. And then, as I like to say, the ball is so afraid of you that it never leaves its little cage, right? And today it's wandering a little bit, but not too bad. Okay, so that's going to be our coordination that we're feeling out. And let's see what we got next here. Let's talk about banking and turning the airplane. So when the airplane banks, we need to ask, what does the stick do? Does the stick bank the airplane, or does it roll the airplane? And there's a distinction between the two. Banking is to have the airplane at a certain bank angle. So you could be level, you could be 90 degrees, 45 degrees, whatever, left or right. But rolling is when the airplane is actively going about its long axis like this. And that is what the ailerons do, is that they roll the airplane. So if I put in the stick and hold it, the airplane's just going to keep getting steeper, 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 steeper. And then I got to stop before I get to 60 degrees bank. And then I go back to the left. And if I am applying the stick, the airplane just banks and banks and banks and banks. And if you keep it in long enough, it'll just roll all the way around. And that would be what we call an aileron roll. And I'm not telling you to do an aileron roll. Our maximum bank angle is 60 degrees under Part 23. And generally we don't go past 45 degrees in private pilot training. But you get the gist of what I'm trying to say in terms of the physics that happen. Is that the stick and the ailerons roll the airplane. They don't bank it. So how do we bank it? Well, we roll it and then we stop rolling. So I'm going to bank to the left, clear left, rolling, rolling, rolling. I get to where I want to be, neutral stick. And if you were flying a 172 or an airplane with a yoke, the yoke would be level. I want to roll out from my left turn, I push the stick to the right. So there are 3 distinct phases to a turn that you should see. And we blend them together once we kind of learn them and we're making them smooth, but there are 3 distinct phases. We roll in, we sweep, and then we unroll. So I'm going to show you a turn to the right with those 3 phases. So clear right, we roll in, we neutralize, we pull back on the stick. We'll talk more about that later. We go around the turn, and then left stick, left rudder, and we roll out. Okay, let's do a turn to the left. Looking left, clear left, turning left. Left stick, left rudder, neutral on both, pull back a little bit, get around the turn, right stick, right rudder, neutral. Okay, so those are the things you should be seeing and feeling there. Now, in terms of hearing, let's talk a little bit about what we should be hearing. So I'm gonna bring the throttle back a little bit. We'll talk about engine noise here in a second. Carburetor heat out. But I'm gonna slow the airplane down here at 3,000 feet, and what you're gonna hear is that the whistle of the Slipstream gets quieter, 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 quieter. And just before we stall, I'm gonna push the nose down, and I'm gonna dive. And we hear the Slipstream noise increase. We pull back, the Slipstream gets quieter. We get slower, push forward, level off at 1,000 feet here, and the Slipstream got louder there. So the sound of the Slipstream, which you should be listening to, is directly correlated to airspeed. The faster we go, the louder the Slipstream gets. The slower we go, the quieter it gets. And if you listen for that, that's going to help you when you're out and about doing maneuvers. It's going to help you when you're doing pattern work. Oh man, it helps a ton when you're doing pattern work to keep the airspeed under control. But you need to be able to listen to that Slipstream. So you need to go up, close the throttle, get enough altitude, and then climb and descend, climb and descend. Listen to that airspeed change in terms of the Slipstream with the airspeed. Now the next thing we can hear is the engine itself overlaid over the top of that Slipstream noise. And so we need to be able to hear very, very, very slight changes in the pitch of the engine. So as I level off here at 3,000 feet, we're going to actually hear the engine accelerate. The RPM will come up. RPM increasing. RPM increasing. Now I'm going to push the nose down. There's red line on the RPM. I'm going to pick the nose up a little bit. I'm going to pick it up and hold it up here. And we're going to hear the RPM drop. Get a drop on the gauge. And so when we're flying a fixed pitch propeller, like on most of our training airplanes, the RPM of the engine's sound, its note, and its volume increase and decrease with the throttle and with airspeed. So if I pull the throttle back, of course we'll hear it get quieter, its note drops, its volume drops. Okay, but once again we can put the nose down and the RPM will increase. The note and volume of the engine will increase, and we got to learn that sound. So I'm going to go to a nice medium RPM now. Level flight here. And now what I'm going to do is kind of like before where I was having the students see very small changes in pitch. I'm going to have them close their eyes. I'm going to have them tell me the first time they hear the engine get louder or quieter. So we're going along here. Drop the nose a little bit. And there, I've already heard it change, right? I go back to level. And so this note is very helpful. So let's say you're busy with your chart or with your EFB working on something and you hear the note of the engine change. That's a clue to you that something's not right and you need to go back and look and see, is my pitch different? Is my airplane pointing or at a different speed than I wanted it at? And there we can hear the note decreasing. And back to level. And the note increases again. So that's another thing we need to listen for. So there's a lot of things to see and hear and feel in the airplane. one last thing in terms of feel. We already talked a little bit about the ball, right? Feeling the coordination come off and how uncomfortable that is. But we also have G-force. And we'll talk a little bit more about G-force when we get to steep turns. But I do like to show just very gently what G-force feels like. And so if we push over here just a little bit, we feel ourselves get light in the seat. We pull back, we feel ourselves get heavy in the seat. So we can absolutely feel some lightening in the G-force there and some increase in the G-force there just by some small rapid pitch changes. Kind of float it there a little bit. Not even 0G, but just maybe even half a G to a G and a half. Just a little bit around that. And so we should be able to feel that again in the seat of our pants. We can feel it in our arms. We can feel it in our legs. We can feel it in just about everything. And we should be able to feel that G-force. And that tells us a lot about what the airplane is doing as well too. Okay, so we looked at pitch, we looked at bank, we looked at yaw. We heard the engine, we heard the slipstream, we felt the G-force, we felt the coordination. And that's going to be a lot of the things that we should be sensing early on in our flight training. And we also gave you some exercises that walked you through that in terms of running the trim out of position and retrimming, and doing our rolls on heading and feeling our adverse yaw coming out and feeling some G-force. We covered a lot very quickly, and we're going to pick up our weather and head back into Wahoo. And here's a little note on some captain stuff that we talked about in the last video. We're about 10 miles away from Wahoo, and one of the things that I see students do is I tell them, hey, okay, we've been out here in the practice area, and let's clear left, turn left, clear left, turn left. We've been out in the practice area, and I'm like, all right, let's head back to the airport. And the first thing they do is point the airplane at the airport and start heading back. And then they start scrambling to get the checklist done, to get all this done. But there is no rush. And a good captain never, ever, ever heads into an airport until they are completely ready to head into that airport. So we're going to get our weather here. And we're just going to set up a gentle orbit to the right. I'm going to set my radio. We'll get the wind. Okay, so we got the weather. Winds are out of 180, the altimeter is basically the same. And so we're going to land to the south, runway 20. So I'm picturing that in my head. I'm to the northwest of the airport. I'm going to go over the airport and teardrop into the downwind for runway 20 to a full stop. So I'm going to picture that in my head. I've got my radio set to the correct frequency. My radio is kind of a little low and out of the way in this airplane, unfortunately. They did not have radios in Luscombe when they built them, that's for sure. So I've got the area in sight. We have a big lake just to the west of the airport. I mean, literally just to the west of it. So it's very easy to find, which is nice. And I'm going to make my first radio call. Wahoo traffic, Luscombe 77903 is 10 miles to the northwest, inbound 20 Wahoo. Okay, so I made my first call, and I'm going to open some vents here, it's warming up. And we're going to head back into the airport. Now I'm thinking ahead, what's my altitude need to be? Well, the field is at 1,200 feet, thereabouts. Pattern roughly 2,200 feet, and then add 500 above that, so 2,700 feet, that's up to descent Teardrop. So now that I have the weather, I have my plan mapped out in my head, and I have the airport in sight. Now I can head into the airport without being any rush. And now I can look outside, I can look for other airplanes, right? The 10-mile ring around an airport is the most dangerous zone that you can be in terms of a mid-air collision, right? Everyone's coming to the airport or going away. So we need to be extra vigilant when we're near airports, even if it's not the one we're landing at. And I'm just continuing my scan. And the last 10 miles of heading into an airport should not be a frantic process of hair on fire, changing frequencies and doing checklists and anything like that. No, the last 10 miles, whether it's in a Luscombe, a 172, a King Air, a jet, or whatever, should be a very calm, very basic, very simple process of just heading into the airport in a pre-planned way, and just eyes outside, looking around, making our radio calls, and being safe. So there's no prizes for getting back to the airport the soonest, right? Getting there 30 seconds earlier, but with your situational awareness fried is not good, right? So the best pilots know when to delay, right? Good pilots know when to do something. Really good pilots know when not to do something. And one of the best times to not do something is to go into an airport until you're absolutely ready to go in. So we're at the correct altitude. We're now about 5 miles out. We got a lot of traffic. Luscombe 903 is about 5 miles to the northwest, inbound for a Teardrop left downwind 20 Wahoo. And there's different schools of thoughts on radio calls, but I like to make mine a little more specific as I go, right? The farther out I am, the less information I'm going to say. But there are people who do it the opposite way. So as we like to say, that's a technique thing, right? But so my 10-mile call, I just said I'm inbound. My 5-mile call, I said this is the pattern entry I'm going to do, and so on. So I'm a little low, squeeze in a little more power, pitch up just a hair. Just scanning. I'm thinking about the next video. I think in the next video we're going to go out and talk a bit more about pitch and power in detail, because that's a fascinating subject. There's a lot of myths and arguments out there about how pitch and power work, and maybe we'll look at that. And so we're coming back into the airport here. And what are you looking for as you come over the top of an airport? Well, the AWAS is not always exactly right, so I like to look at the windsock. I like to look to see if there are airplanes taxiing out on the ramp, even if there are hangar doors open, right? If there are hangar doors open, maybe the locals are out flying. Just little things that may help you have an idea of what you're getting yourself into. Another call here. Flight traffic, Luscombe 903 is a mile northwest. We're crossing midfield for a left teardrop entry, left downwind 20 Wahoo. And back up to 2,700 feet. I can pick up my left wing tip here, take a look-see. Right. And even on very gusty, windy days, you know, I've had winds 20 knots, and people land downwind, right? Blows my mind. How do you land downwind in a 20-knot tailwind? I don't know, but they managed to do it. So never assume that you should only look one way at the airport because the winds would preclude landing the other way. Well, someone might try taking off downwind or landing downwind. You never know. So you've got to just always keep your head on a swivel. Always be looking for people in any quadrant around the airport. So the whole point of the teardrop entry is to put you into the downwind. That's the whole point. Basically to put you out there to enter on the 45 to the downwind. And so what you don't want to do with a teardrop entry is just bomb it right down with a steep descent and a hard pull into the downwind. I've seen that a lot, and that's more just trying to check the box than it is actually make a safe entry, right? So airplanes go really fast, they cover ground quickly, and so there's no reason we can't go out an extra mile or two, take an extra minute, give yourself the room, right? However wide someone might fly the pattern, you probably want to be at least twice that distance from the airport laterally before you start down and come around, right? So I'm a good 2 miles away now, so now I can bring the power back and nose it down a little bit. Start to descend. Wire traffic, Luscombe 903 is 2 to the southeast now. We're going to enter the left downwind on a 45 Wahoo. Coming down, and I'm not going to turn until I get to 2,200 feet because traffic that's at the same altitude in the pattern at 2,200 feet, I won't see them until I'm at the same altitude, right? Because if I'm above them, they're going to be down in the dirt or really close to it. So I get to 2,200 feet, I level off, I look around, I'm clear, then I can add the power in, make a turn. And the cool thing in the Luscombe is I've got a window up here, and so I can actually, if I'm banking pretty steep, I can actually look out that window as I'm making the turn, which is not something you typically have on a high-wing airplane, but it's nice. So now I'm at pattern altitude. The wind pushed me a little too far to the north for a 45, so I'm just going to work my way south here for a little bit. And then I'll enter on the 45. And then, as like I said before, I'm just eyes outside, scanning, looking for traffic, looking at the airport, looking at my bank and pitch off the wing, looking at my coordination off the wing, feeling my coordination in the seat of my pants. And really the only thing I'm coming inside for, frankly, to be honest, is altitude and oil pressure, right? Oil pressure is life in a little airplane, right? You need that oil pressure. It's not a guarantee that the engine's happy, but if you don't have oil pressure, you're in big trouble, right? So oil pressure and altitude, and they're good. And I come right back outside and I start scanning again. That's all I need. Now I'm in a good position to enter on a 45. Wire traffic, Luscombe 77903 is a 45 entry, left downwind 20 Wahoo. There you go. Dugging along here. Pattern altitude, oil pressure's good. Back outside. Scanning, scanning, scanning. So even though I'm in a busy phase of flight, I still have the time to be eyes outside, scanning, looking for other traffic, not glazed over, looking at gauges, not looking at my GPS. I'm just eyes outside, looking for threats, making sure I'm in the right position, and flying the airplane. Okay, I'm in a good position now. I'm going to enter the downwind. Wire traffic, Luscombe 903, join in left downwind 20 Wahoo. Air high. Now I'm at midfield. Fuel's on. Actually both, there's really not much to check here. Check my landing checklist. Carb heat, throttle, trim 65. Okay, I'm coming to beam the numbers. I pull the carb heat out, listen for a slight drop in RPM, and then I slowly bring the throttle out because I like my engine and I don't want to have to pay to overhaul it early, so I take about, I don't know, 8-10 seconds to pull the throttle smoothly and slowly to idle. I see people just absolutely yank the throttle out, and you got you know, all this spinning metal up there, it's worth a ton of money. Why would you yank it around like that, right? I'll be gentle to it. Wahoo traffic, Luscombe 77903 is left base 20 Wahoo. Okay, runway looks clear. I'm looking to the right down final. No one's coming in on a super long final. Okay, I'm feeling the atmosphere as I'm coming down. I'm picking up just a few hairs of the bumps. And I'm going to start my turn to final. I'm doing 65. Yep, there we go. Take a look at my windsock. Now, every good pilot takes a look at the windsock just before they land. And so I'm seeing just a hair of a left crosswind from the left. I'm going to slip just a little bit. Wahoo traffic, Luscombe 903, short final 20, full stop Wahoo. Okay, coming down. Look down to the long end of the runway, the far end, and I just smoothly pulling back, keeping her straight. There we go. And the winds are pretty calm. I can keep the tail up, add a little power, and roll it down the runway. Now, once again here, I'm looking over the nose at my pitch attitude relative to the end of the runway, which is kind of my new horizon. And I'm looking to keep the airplane on centerline. So there's centered right there. If I was over here, I'd be off centerline. That's not good. And the same would go over to the other side here. Not good to be over here. Now we're in a good spot to bring the tail down. Here we go. Push the carbine back in. Come back onto centerline. And now we're good and slow, there's no rush. We're clear to the left, clear to the right. Clear left, clear right on the taxiway. Got my hands full right now, I'm trying to keep this thing going the way I want it to go. Get off the runway. Come to a stop. Wahoo traffic, Luscombe 77903, clear all runways, taxi to the hangars at Wahoo. Okay, reset my trim, that's really all I have to do. And I turn the fuel valve off, open the window. Okay, and now, once again, I'm taxiing slow. Keeping the airplane on centerline. Using as little power as necessary. Trying to keep my feet off the brakes. Constantly watching straight. Clear right, turning right. Got a pothole up here I'm going to avoid, so I'm going to sit in the center of the left side of the taxiway. Slowly brake. Come to a stop. Run the power up. And she dies. And with these, if you give it a little bit of power just before it dies, you get a nice clean stop.
Alright everyone, thanks for coming along on this flight today in the Luscombe, especially if you stuck around this long. I hope you found something useful from the fundamentals that you can apply to your future flying. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below and I'll make sure to get to them. Please like and subscribe for future videos. And until next time, fly safe.